Hello everyone and welcome to a very nice game. Was played in round one of the Legends and Prodigies tournament between Jose Fernando Cuenca Jimenez and Faustino Oro. You're better known as Pepe Cuenca. You know him as, he's the Ratatatata commentator, very well known in the chess world, of course, a legend if you will. Obviously, he's invited to the Legends and Prodigies tournament, him being the legend and Faustino being the prodigy. And we haven't covered Faustino's games in quite a while, but now I feel like it's always a good time. But now, if he's to become the youngest Grandmaster ever, and I imagine that's the goal, he has to do it sometimes before February of 2026. So he doesn't have a lot of time, but still it's plenty of time. He's fairly close to 2,500. He still does not have any Grandmaster norms. But he started this tournament very well. He's currently at a 3,200 rating performance as he started off with 2 victories. But you have to get 3 norms. That's finishing 3 tournaments where strong players have played, and you have to have a fairly strong rating performance. And while I don't think that in itself, becoming the youngest Grandmaster ever should be a goal, it always kind of is, because once you achieve that, you get more opportunities, you get more sponsors. Life just becomes easier. So, like I said, I don't know if that's the goal in itself, but as you're already this close, probably it becomes at some point. But yeah, it shouldn't be. You should just play, to the best of your abilities. You should develop, at a proper rate. You can't rush anything. And, whatever happens, it will happen. But, we're already here, so let's check it out. Pepe Cuenca versus Faustino Oro. This is round 1 of Legends and Prodigies. Let's check it out. And it's a, pretty cool game. It goes into the endgame right away. Sort of reminds me of the good old days of Chess Master 11 and, just listening to Josh Waitzkin on how to play good chess. So yeah, Pepe with white opens with pawn to d4. We have pawn to d5 from Faustino. C4 we have pawn to e6, knight to c3, and Faustino goes for the semi-Slav through the accelerated move order. We have pawn to e4, already burning some 8 minutes on this e4 pawn push. We have d captures, knight to d7, and knight to f3. We have knight g to f6, and Pepe trades on f6. We have captures, and bishop to e2. Already down to 1 hour and 18 minutes, whereas Faustino is still well within his preparation, and he goes for bishop to b4 check, which is a known move. Bishop to d2, and now there are a couple of games where bishop captures on d2 was played, but here we have queen to a5. And it is now as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. Faustino obviously still well within his preparation. We have castles kingside by Pepe, bishop captures on d2, queen captures, and knight captures. So just trading everything, going straight for the endgame. And while you would expect castles kingside here, and no one would blame you if you played that, we have king to e7. Now the queens are off the board, the kings below in the center of the board, and that is how Faustino plays. We have knight to f3. Rook to d8, getting the rook to the semi-open d file makes sense. There's a target on d4, and rook f to d1. The other rook will come to c1, or maybe remain on a1, we'll see. Knight to d7, and rook a to c1. We have pawn to b6, we have pawn to c5, and now bishop to b7. So, okay, this is the position. Roughly, it's equal, but as you can see, for the moment, the light square bishop on b7 isn't really a tremendous piece. So, Faustino will have to figure out how to get it either activated or exchanged for the bishop on e2. We have rook c3. Now, well, you have a lot of options. You can, browse the entire third rank, or you can double up on the d file, you can double up on the c file. So it becomes a very versatile rook. We have knight to f6, rook to a3, just putting some pressure on that a7 pawn, and knight to d5. Now, an excellent square for the knight. We have knight to e5, also an excellent square for the knight, and pawn to b5. Keeping the queen side closed, we have bishop to f1 and pawn to f6. Here, Faustino tries to challenge the knight on e5 and, just get it away from there. On e5, it's a magnificent piece. It does weaken the e6 pawn a little bit, but, you have to choose between the lesser of two evils. However, Pepe does not move the knight. He goes rook g3. He says, if you capture, I can capture on g7 with check, and I'm going to pick up the bishop on b7. So we have pawn to g6, and now Pepe decides to go back, and he plays knight to d3. And he's already below 10 minutes on the clock, which is incredible. It's move 22. You should play rook h3 here. Maybe it would be a slight improvement. And then it's very hard for black to make a move. You cannot go h5 as the g-pawn is hanging. You would have to go rook all the way to h8. And okay, then you move the knight, knight g4. But you've weakened black. Black is no longer occupying the d file. And your position is a little bit easier to play, and black still has that weird bishop on b7, probably has to go to c8 and then hope to activate via this diagonal. But okay, after g6, Pepe went back, knight to d3, we have king f7 and rook to g4. We have rook to d7, now trying to get the other rook into the game. Rook to e1, we have rook a to d8, occupying the d file with both rooks, and rook h4, going after the h-pawn. Pawn to h5, and now rook h back to e4. We have knight c7, knight to f4, putting pressure on the e6 pawn. It's sufficiently defended, but better make sure that it stays that way. So rook to e7, now it's defended 3 times, attacked 3 times, and knight to d3. Unfortunately, there's no way for the bishop to join in on the attack. You don't really have time for something like bishop d3, bishop b1, a3, bishop a2, and then after the a6 pawn. It's definitely a plan, but one that can easily be stopped. So here we have knight d3, pawn to g5, and now comes pawn to h4. And this is one of those moments where the engine says pawn to f4 is the best move for white, but it's really not at all clear why. And the reason for that is that you can easily kick away the rook, f5, and after you get the e5 square for the knight back, okay, king g7, and now you move the rook. Captures, okay, you open up the g file, and now the d pawn is hanging as well. Let's say you defend the rook to d2, knight to d5, and after, let's say, bishop e2, you attack the pawn, pawn to h4, bishop f3. It's a nice position, and the engine even says white is better, but it's not easy to decide to go for something like this. The bishop here is terrible. It's not easy to activate it, especially now with pawns on e6 and f5. Obviously, one of the main reasons why you should play like this. But Pepe went pawn to h4. He decided to challenge the g-pawn with the h-pawn. We have pawn to f5, rook 4 to e3, and now g captures on h4. We have knight to e5 check, king to f6, and now rook to d1, again defending the d-pawn. Knight a6, now with some hopes of maybe sometimes in the future capturing on c5, then d captures, then maybe the knight on e5 becomes weak, but there's time for that. Bishop to e2, we have rook to g7, trying to give up the h5 pawn, but if you give up the h5 pawn, then you give black a move. Then the knight comes to b4. Then the a2 is attacked. The knight is coming to c2. Will put pressure on d4. Then you might have some knight captures on d4 followed by king captures on e5. Because if you play h3, the rook might move from the e file. So there's all of this you have to take into consideration. So after bishop to e2, rook to g7 first. Trying to double up on the g file, and now you should go king h2. But even after king h2, let's say rook d to g8 and bishop to f3, it's not easy for black to make a move. So this is definitely what you should play with white, because there's no threat, and still the bishop on b7 is weird. So after rook g7, bishop to f3 was played right away. Now Faustino could execute pawn to h3, as the rook no longer has access to h3. But he was, I guess, playing on Pepe's time. Pepe already down to 35 seconds on the clock. Goes knight b4, which is also a perfectly fine move. Bishop to e2, and now you don't capture on a2, probably what Pepe was hoping for. If Faustino captures, then you can go rook to h3, and then you start gobbling up the king side. No, Faustino goes for knight to c2. Attacks the rook on e3. We have rook e to d3, and now pawn to h3. Inviting the capture on h3, but of course, if you capture on h3, then knight captures on d4. And you just fall apart here. There's not a lot you can do here. The bishop is attacked, the knight is attacked, everything is defended for black. This is game over. So instead, after h3, Pepe went for pawn to g3. We have pawn to h4 and king to h2. H captures, F captures, and now, while you could play knight captures on d4, Faustino goes for rook captures on d4, and he completely shatters white's defenses. The knight on e5 is attacked. What can you play here? Well, there is a way to continue the game. Of course, Pepe finds it. Rook captures on d4, knight captures, and now knight to g4 with check. F captures on g4, and now rook captures on d4. And it seems that he has everything worked out. The bishop is still bad. He's ready to capture on g4. Then he's going to capture on h3. It seems like he's well on his way to either winning or, maybe it's going to be a draw. But if Faustino finds the one move that Pepe couldn't find, as he's already very low on time, he will win the game. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the best move for Faustino while I give you a couple of seconds. Yes, it's a weird move to play, but it is pawn to e5. Congratulations to everyone who found that. You are a tremendous endgame player, and the reason for that is that, well, your rook is hanging, and if you just move the rook somewhere along the d file to keep an eye on the d file, then the king comes into the game. King f5, king e4, king e3, and okay, it's easily winning for black. And if you play rook captures on g4, which was played in the game, seems like what's the problem? We're still winning the g pawn. But now you give up the d file to the black rook, and now the rook is coming to d2, and you just don't have a good reply here. Whatever you play, rook d2 is the next move. So rook e4, defending the bishop at least. We have rook to d2. King captures on h3. Okay, you're unpinning, but rook captures on b2. We have pawn to a4, as you're going to lose that pawn either way. B captures on a4, and now we have bishop to g4. You still don't have time to capture, as the bishop would hang. So bishop to g4, and now bishop to a6. Of course, inviting the capture on a4. But if you capture on a4, then just bishop to f1 check. King to h4, and of course rook to h2 with check, and you have nothing. You have to play bishop to h3, and then you lose the full piece. So after bishop to a6, bishop to d7 is played by Pepe, and now bishop b5 defending the pawn. So a beautiful series of moves that gives Faustino not just a winning position, but an easily winning one. We have rook to e3. Of course, Pepe will try everything to defend. Rook b3. Any rook trade here is just winning for Faustino because the pawn will be unstoppable. So rook e1, we have pawn to a3, rook to a1, and now just rook d3, freeing up this diagonal for the bishop so you can advance the pawn all the way to a2. We have bishop to g4, bishop to c4, and now king to h4. But it doesn't matter. Pawn to a2, we have bishop to d1, and now just rook to d2. And he was in this position on move 54 that Pepe Cuenca resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. The rook can't move, the bishop really has nothing to do, and you're just going to advance the e-pawn and win the game easily. And if white maybe starts advancing the g-pawn, let's say g4, e4, g5 check, king f5, let's say bishop g4 check, you can even go king f4, pawn to g6, rook h2 check, and that's it. Bishop h3, bishop e6, and there's no stopping rook captures on h3, which will be checkmate. So g7, rook captures on h3, and that's a beautiful checkmate. So yeah, very nicely done. Faustino started off the Legends and Prodigies tournament with a win against Pepe Cuenca. He also won his round 2 game, so, beating 2 Grandmasters in a row. Like I said, his rating performance is currently at around 3,200. So performing well in this tournament will give him a Grandmaster norm, and, if he gets 2 more, he might become the youngest ever, as that is what everyone is considering and, waiting for. His opponent for round 3 is Miao Yilu, who is an incredible player. We cover most of her games, and, she's one of the most tactical players today, and all of the games are just impressive. She hasn't had a great start to the tournament, but if you have a chance, check out her round 1 game against Alan Pichot. I mean, that game is just wow. I might even show it. It's really brutal. She lost, but it's a brutal game. So yeah, if you can, definitely check it out. But yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank John Veria, Duncan Winecall, Ramesh Sadi, Sanjeev Sharma, and Creators Workshop for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And if you still haven't, first link in the description below. Download Lotus Chess and start your chess journey today. Learn how to play fighting chess and crush your opponents easily. See you soon.